Hi, folks. I'm Mark Horstman of Manager Tools, and this is Things I Think for 3 September 2020. More about economics, as promised. I mentioned economic news a couple of times earlier this week in previous editions of Things. Everybody thinks about economics as a study of money and how it affects our society. But that's really an incomplete and unhelpful view. It's a lot more than that. I'm no expert, but the best way I've learned to think about economics is to remember that it addresses how we choose to produce and allocate scarce resources. Allocating unlimited resources isn't difficult, but how we each choose, how we each produce with our talents and allocate our scarce resources of time and energy and creativity is what leads to the dynamism of our world, undergirded by our freedoms. Even though all the economic stuff we read and talk about are about averages and percentages, we each play a role. Economics for each of us isn't about those big numbers. It's about what each of us does with what we are given. A society which uses its scarce resources more wisely will outproduce and therefore outgrow a society who chooses to apply themselves less effectively and efficiently. And the way you get to that society is to add up all the productive work of every one of us, each one of us, in it. Individual productivity is the driving force of all economic outcomes. Your productivity matters. Master it. One of my all-time favorites. The concept of each of us adding up to all of us is central to one of the most remarkable and touching pieces of writing I've ever read. I've often referenced it when marking the passing of someone known to us all, but it's not just about death. It's about how we are all connected. Here then is a portion of John Donne's Devotions upon Emergent Occasions. No man is an island, entire unto himself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manor of thy friends or of thine own were. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never sin to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. 2 points here that are probably unnecessary and which longtime readers have heard me say before. First, the tolling bell references the ringing of church bells in small towns upon a resident's death. It would be customary in the 16th century when Donne was writing in Europe for someone to hear the bells and send someone from their household, sin to know, to find out who had died, because everyone knew everyone in their village. Related to this, towns back then were by definition small, and for centuries, the size of towns were largely limited to the size of the church that could be built, because towns were built around where virtually all of the people of the town worshipped. Flying buttresses changed this, by the way, allowing churches to be much bigger and taller. If you don't recognize the name, you've still seen them, for example, at Notre Dame. Second, you probably recognize the passage, For Whom the Bell Tolls. It is immortalized as the title of one of Ernest Hemingway's great works about the Spanish Civil War, an important presage to World War II. Lagniappe. There is a delicious story told of Christopher Wren, the famous architect of London's St. Paul's Cathedral, which, by the way, has flying buttresses. He rebuilt it after the Great Fire of London in 1666. If you don't immediately visualize St. Paul's, its most memorable image is known as St. Paul Survives, a photo of its dome surrounded by a decimated, smoking London during the Blitz of 1940. That's the one. There is no doubt that it was a prime target of the bombers, and despite being hit, it stood and reminded Londoners of their motto to keep calm and carry on. A replica poster with the slogan hangs on my office door. Now the story. Wren is said to have taken over the building of the beautiful and famous Windsor Guildhall, standing only a couple of hundred meters from Windsor Castle. When it was built, as I was told in a tour, the area at ground level was left open as a market area. The guildmasters complained that more pillars were clearly needed in that open area to support the large hall above it. Wren said it wasn't necessary, but in the end relented and placed the pillars to satisfy the owners. And to prove his point, Wren left a small space between the tops of all the pillars and the building above. They're still there, gaps and all. A day late. I meant to include a brief "This Day in History" yesterday with things I think, and I regret the omission. 75 years ago yesterday, the final surrender of World War II was signed aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay. The most destructive war in the history of mankind was over. Today, virtually all of the signatories are allies and trading partners and friends. Our problems today are great, and we are greater. Ozymandias was wrong, and this too shall pass. Stay frosty.